Hello, N4H&H here. This will be my third video regarding the Yaesu FT-710. That is the new HF transceiver from Yaesu. It's currently going through FCC type acceptance, so once it's approved, it'll be released. They're hoping, from what I heard, sometime in September, so hopefully that will be the case. Looks like an exciting new radio. What it's going to do is it's going to be positioned like a FTDX 1200 was to the FTDX 3000D. Let me explain. So the FTDX 3000D was the, if you will, the little brother of the FTDX 5000. And then the FTDX 1200, which looked a whole lot like an FTDX 3000D, was the little brother of the FTDX 3000D. It lacked some of the niceties, we'd say, maybe of the FTDX 3000D. It didn't have down conversion, for example, was not compatible to work with the mu tuning preselectors, but nonetheless, like an economized version of the FTDX 3000D. So what the FT-710 is targeted to be is the little brother to the FTDX 10. One of the reasons you can tell is because it looks so much like a 710, similar to how the FTDX 1200 looked a whole lot like an FTDX 3000D. So think of the FT-710 as an economy version of an FTDX 10. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be a bad radio. The FTDX 1200 was not a bad radio. It's just not going to have all the bells and whistles, as they say, of the FTDX 10. So, for example, it's not going to have the hybrid technology. It won't have the dual superheterodyne, easy for me to say, dual superheterodyne receiver coupled to the FPGA or the SDR stage, which is one of the advantages that the FTDX 10 has, as well as the FTDX 101D and MP. And it puts those radios in the top of the range for reciprocal mixing dynamic range, RMDR. If you are one that reads the Rob Sherwood test data list, the FTDX 101D and MP are currently positioned at number 1 for reciprocal mixing dynamic range. A simplified answer on that, if you're not familiar with it, is probably the best measure of a receiver. And in simplistic terms, it has to do with the ability of the radio to be able to pull a weak signal out while a strong signal is nearby, up or down the band. So the FTDX 101D and MP are currently king of the hill for that at a rating of 110 decibels. The FTDX 10 sits at 3 dB lower than that at 107. Not bad. Rob Sherwood would tell you that anything above 90 is good. So, and there are a lot of radios above 90, but the FTDX 101D and MP are at the top of the heap. Now, number 2 on that list is the Flex 6700. However, if you read the footnotes, that was a special version of that radio that was sent to the Sherwood Labs for testing. They subsequently tested some production models, and they rated 99 dB, not 108. So you can't get your hands on I guess we can't buy a 6700 with a 108 decibel RMDR rating. So that means that the FTDX 10 has a 107 decibel RMDR rating, is positioned at number 2 in reality. So you got the number 1 and number 2 radios in the world, based upon their receive characteristics, are what we call a hybrid, or Yaesu calls a hybrid. So that is a dual superheterodyne receiver working in conjunction with a SDR, software defined radio stage. So it's turned out to be a phenomenal radio architecture. I mean, the FTDX 10 is just unbelievable. I've got one sitting over here behind me. As a matter of fact, you see that monitor behind me up there displaying its screen. And it's just an amazing receiver, amazing at tackling noise, amazing at pulling weak signals out of the noise floor. So what's the FT-710 going to do? Well, it looks a lot like, and we're going to show you here in just a moment if you haven't watched my first 2 videos, it looks a whole lot like an FTDX 10, naturally, just like the FTDX 1200 looked a whole lot like an FTDX 3000D. Now, you may recall back on July 6th when the FT-710 was a rumor, There'd been a photo released, and that's all we had to go by. And how it got out, don't know. Might have been an intentional leak even on the part of Yaesu, just for marketing reasons, and I'm okay with that. But there was so much speculation that day that the very next day, John Kruk from Yaesu USA posted a video making it official and even announced that the radio is even listed now on the Yaesu website. And that's where I'm going to take you next. So, and I should mention, so in that next day video number 2 about the FT-710, I did have more info that, I was able to get after John made it official. And it had to do with the fact that in the first video, there was mention, and the specs that came out mentioned a 10 watt, a 50 watt, and a 100 watt version. So I was hoping that the 10 watt version was going to be something like an IC705, and maybe that Yaesu was going to have a small version of the 710 that we would be able to take backpacking, those of us who are into summits on the air. Such is not the case. The 10 watt and 50 watt models are for countries that have limits on the power output. The U.S. market will have a 100 watt version. And by the way, the size of the FT-710 is slightly smaller than an FT-991A, if that'll help you out with a point of reference. Okay, with that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and shrink me down here to the corner of the display here so we can take a look at Yaesu's website. Let me move things around here a little bit on the monitors. Okay, so when you go to yaesu.com right now, you will see at the very top, FT-710. I'm going to click on the little image there, and it takes us to the page for the FT-710. Now, notice that there is no files tab like there is with the other radios, because they haven't released anything more about the radio other than what we see here, and we're going to read that in a moment. They do have some accessories listed for it, the typical microphones, headphones, the generic accessories. So as a point of reference, I'm going to switch over to the FT-DX10 and show you what I mean. See the Files tab where we can download firmware updates, and then up here in this upper area is what I want to focus on, because what you have up here is the ability to look at some sales brochure type information, but there's some technical literature in that as well that is used in sales. So what I want to do is I've already got one of them downloaded here for the FT-DX10, and I want to show you what I want to focus on. Now I've got it zoomed in right now. Let me zoom out so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about here. So you've got this technical literature, sales literature, if you will. And, it gives some specs and they highlight some of the main features. See, it's a 5-inch TFT color display. There's a photo. There's the matching SP30 speaker, which I have and I've covered in some videos. You may recall where I went into that speaker and added some baffling to make it sound better. But you'll see here they get into some of the technical details. A hybrid SDR narrowband. See, that's what we were talking about a while ago. It's going to have a dual super heterodyne receiver coupled to an SDR. See, now what's the importance of that? The SDRs tend to suffer from front-end overload. They just can't handle the amount of RF coming in the front end of the receiver. And now the better quality ones will have some filtering to help out with that. But that is, a little bit of an issue with them, because remember that you may have heard the words direct sampling. So think of it as this, like a needle on a record player, okay? Those of you who may go back far enough with me to remember the old vinyl records. That needle, you can drop it anywhere and pick up a different part of a song, a different part of a different song, if you will. Well, so what's happening is the direct sampling radio is doing the similar thing with RF. So you got a wide spectrum of electromagnetic waves out there, radio signals, and basically it samples whatever frequency you would like to hear. But coming into the front end of the radio, depending upon your antenna, that's the subject of another discussion, but your antenna does help you with, we'll call it attenuation, because wherever your antenna is optimized for, whatever band, then it's going to help block some of that other RF that you wouldn't necessarily want entering the front end of your radio. Like I said, subject of another video, but I'll give you a teaser. A multiband antenna, which by the nature of the beast, it's going to hear a lot more frequency ranges than a single band dipole, which is, cut, trimmed, optimized for the band that it is set to operate on, and it will not receive other bands as well. So think of that as a little bit of what we call a pre-selector, okay? So the issue with the SDRs, the direct sampling receivers, is they're just hearing a whole lot, okay, coming in the front end of the radio. Now, again, good filtering can help with that, but it means the cost of the radio is going to be more. So, you're going to pay more for a radio that's got better filtering in it. That's just the way it is, whether it be a super heterodyne architecture or a hybrid architecture or the SDR itself. All right, where it's just a standalone software-defined radio, no coupling to any type of heterodyne stage. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to scroll down a little bit. Again, we're looking at the FT-10 right now, and I want to show you this. I want to hone in on this area right here, the block diagram of the receiver. So you can see with the FT-10, your signal comes in off the antenna, goes through attenuation, which in the FT-10 you have 3 attenuation levels, 6, 12, or 18 dB, or none. And then you have bandpass filters, BPF, 15 of them. Okay, so most of those are for the ham radio bands, but then you've got some for, remember, these radios can hear between the amateur bands, so outside of the bands that we're allowed to operate on. So it's got bandpass filters to accommodate that. And then you have an RF amplifier stage. Now, many people that are new to amateur radio hear the word RF amplifier and they think linear, but that's not the case here. This is the stage of amplification that takes that signal in off the antenna and boosts it, okay? Now, there's a lot going on in that stage. There's, in a super heterodyne receiver, there's some mixing, as we call it, going on, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. If you want to see all about mixing, go back and look at the video I shot over a year ago about how a super heterodyne receiver works. It's a breakdown and block diagram through every stage. But the RF amplifier stage, for all intents and purposes for this video, it boosts that signal coming in off the antenna. And there's mixing going on here. So the mixer's shown separately. The RF amplifier boosts it. Mixer is going to change the frequency to a frequency, not the same frequency that's coming in off the air, but a frequency that the roofing filter can work with. And in this case, in the FT-10, that roofing filter is around 9 megahertz, okay? Just shy of 9 megahertz. And so they're not always exact, is what I'm getting at, but it's around 9 megahertz. And the reason for that is there are great roofing filters available in that 9 megahertz range. And you'll notice here that the signal then travels to an analog to digital converter, and there's your FPGA chip. That is the SDR stage. But there's another analog to digital converter going into the FPGA as well. Now look what that one's for. The display, see over here? Now the other signal path goes to DSP, and then digital to analog conversion, putting it back to something we can understand, and then it's amplified and sent to your speaker. But the other half here goes out to the display. That's how we get our waterfall. So that's the breakdown of the FT-10. Now, you'll see here it says direct sampling SDR. So since there's not one of these diagrams available yet for the FT-710, I want to use this one as an example. So you're going to have the attenuation, you're going to have bandpass filters, hopefully really good quality, maybe even better bandpass filters to help this SDR stage. But what you won't have is you won't have all of this mixing going on and the roofing filter. Okay, more on that in a moment. In fact, if you remember my very first video about this radio, the one that came out on July 6th, I pointed out that the display looked identical to the FT-10, except where the roofing filter options were on the FT-10, it said DNF, digital notch filter. That's Yaesu speak for auto notch, to knock out a heterodyne when somebody's tuning. So, they just had a space to put something, so I guess they figured might as well make it something you can tap with your finger to turn it on and off, finger or mouse. Okay, so that that's gone. And that's the reason is, see, that's involved with a superhet receiver, a super heterodyne receiver, where you're taking that signal off the antenna and breaking it down, if you will, to a different frequency, in this case 9 megahertz. What you'll see with the FT-710, from what I can tell, because there's not a diagram released yet, but from what I'm observing from photos and specs, what you're going to have happen is the signal is going to travel directly to the A to D conversion here. See, direct sampling SDR, and then it'll be processed by the FPGA chip, and after that it'll be like an FTDX10. As a matter of fact, really, actually, from here, from the analog to digital conversion on out, it'll be like an FTDX10, and it will have the Yaesu DSP digital signal processing stage to handle all the wonderful things like contour and digital noise reduction. I mean, it's just, it's a great, to me, and I don't work for Yaesu. you guys know that have watched my channel for a while. While I may have Yaesu radios, I'm just objective. I really am. I just look for the best radio. I believe Yaesu's DSP is superior. They've just done such a great job with the programming on that. Okay, so now let's take a look at the FT-710, armed and dangerous with this amount of information. So like I said, if you go to Yaesu's website and look up the FTDX10 and look up, let me show you the page that is. It's the very first link. Hopefully you can see my mouse moving over here. Let me zoom in. It says FTDX10 catalog under Files tab, okay? That's this document here. So if you take a look at that, for all intents and purposes, from the best information that I can glean from what I've seen so far, you're just not going to have the mixer roofing filter stage. The signal is going to go directly to the analog to digital converter. And other than that, it'll mimic the FTDX10. Okay, so back over to Yaesu.com, and I want to move over back to here to the FT-710, and let's take a look at some of these specs. Again, notice, no Files tab yet. Hopefully there'll be one coming soon, and we'll be able to get a catalog page like the one I just showed you for the FTDX10. All right, so I'm going to scoot over here a little bit and keep this zoomed in so you can read the text with me. So as of July 2022, this device has not been approved by the FCC. Like I said, it's being tested right now. It may not be offered for sale or lease or be sold or leased until FCC approval has been obtained. This information the information shown is preliminary and may be subject to change without notice or obligation. So what we're about to read could even change. But based upon what we see now, let's take a look. Yaesu is excited to announce the HF 50 megahertz, so it's HF plus 6 meters, 100 watt software-defined radio transceiver FT-710 AESS. Now I'm going to skip down and let's talk about the AESS part of that since it's already mentioned. It is... and by the way, it's going to ship with a speaker. I'll show you that in a moment, because it needs the speaker for this. Check it out. The AESS is acoustic. Let me highlight this line here. Acoustic enhanced speaker system with SP40 creates the high fidelity audio output. Okay, so we'll have to wait to see what that sounds like. But that's why they're calling it AESS, acoustic enhanced speaker system. And if you look here where it says supplied accessories, SSM75E, that's the hand mic, same hand mic they use with the FTDX10. Why reinvent it, If you got a good thing, leave it alone. SP40 high-quality external speaker and a DC power cable. So that's what's going to come with the radio as an accessory. So I just wanted to point that out since that is in the model number, FT-710 AESS. Okay, so it says here it's going to provide 100 watts and a compact radio. Like I said, its dimensions are a little bit smaller than an FT-991A, utilizing the advanced digital RF technology introduced in the FTDX101 and FTDX10 series. So see, it's a little brother of these big brothers here. Like I said, think of it as an FTDX10 Lite, all right? Economized version. But like I said, I don't think it's going to be lesser of a radio than many of the SDRs that are out there right now. In fact, I think it's going to probably give them a good run for the money. Okay, so a few of the remarkable features of this FT-710 AESS are: Yaesu unmatched SDR technology emphasizes the receiving performance. Okay, so that right there tells me that Yaesu has probably sat back, crossed your arms, watched what some of the other manufacturers have achieved with SDR and made notes, and perhaps have come out with a way to, hopefully this radio will reveal this, a way to improve on the SDR technology, especially with that front end filtering. Bandpass filters dedicated for the amateur bands to eliminate out-of-band unwanted signals. So see, that's going to help. Other SDRs have that as well, but they still were subject to front-end overload, and their selectivity wasn't up to the standard of most superhets. So I say most superhets, some of the better quality superhets. Let's put it that way. If you look at Sherwood's test data list, you're going to find that all but I think one, don't hold me to it, but I think only one radio in the top 10 is an SDR, and I believe that's the KX3. So from Elecraft. I believe the rest of those are all super heterodynes of some flavor. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Now, look at the let me get back to the out-of-band signal. So that's hopefully going to help with that, that front end. RF front end designed with 250 megahertz HRDDS, high-resolution direct digital synthesizer, enables phenomenal multi-signal receiving characteristics. Okay, a lot of marketing jargon there. They're just trying to give us a hint that they're going to do their very, very best to give this thing a good front end, even though it does not have the benefit that the hybrid has. QRM rejection by the dual-core 32-bit high-speed floating decimal point DSP, digital signal processor, and it's going to handle such features as shift, width, notch, contour, audio peak filter, the APF DNR, digital noise reduction, NB, noise blanker, and 3-stage parametric equalizer. So, that's the same as with an FT-DX10. High resolution 4.3-inch TFT. So you see on the FT-DX10, that's a 5-inch. So it's a little bit smaller. And that's, again, this is going to be a more portable radio. In fact, I'm considering it might be a good mobile. 3DSS, so it's going to have the three-dimensional spectrum scope like the FT-DX10 has, which at first, full disclosure here, I don't care about waterfalls anyway. I just want a spectrum scope. But at first I played with the waterfall a little bit, and then I played with the spectrum scope, then I played with the waterfall. I'm back to the spectrum scope because of the way I set it up. I set the level on that to where I don't see the noise, so I don't even need averaging. I only want to see spikes that represent a signal, and then blank space where there is no signal, and therefore I don't want to see the noise. All right, but so this is going to have the same capability as the FT-DX10 with the 3D spectrum. They call it stream. Think of it as a spectrum scope. VMI LED. Now that's new. VFO mode indicator. Placed around the VFO dial shows the current operating mode. VFO A, VFO B, memory mode, and clarifier split operation. So that'll be something neat to play with there that we don't see on the FT-DX10. It does have it has an outer dial around the VFO, and that outer dial can do some of these things, but this is going to be handled a little bit differently on the FT-710. Preset mode function most suitable for FT8 operations. So, a subsequent update, firmware update for the FT-DX10 added that preset option, which basically is saves you from going into the menu and setting some things up in the FT-DX10 for FT8 operation. Now, I just set up my FT-DX10 for FT8. Okay, full disclosure, FT8 doesn't interest me, but I did it for my viewers. I wanted to go ahead and set an FT-DX10 up so I could write a how-to document from start to finish related to FT8, and it's available to my executive and VIP Patreon supporters, those who support this channel and bring you these videos. So it's a gift to them. And but I want you to know, I'm running an older version of the FT-DX10 firmware that does not have this preset function. The only thing I had to do, and I documented this in the document, all I had to do was go in and set those menu selections myself. And it actually, if you hit that preset, it actually sets them up with some boilerplate. Okay, for those of you who don't understand what that means, because I know my videos are viewed in other countries. Some basic settings, okay? And then you may still have to alter those a little bit. But the preset button was something just to save you a little bit of time in setting it up for FT8. Like I said, what I did in my document for the Patreon supporters, executive and VIP level, I went ahead and documented every setting. All right, then there's the AESS part talking about the acoustic enhanced speaker system. And again, the SP40 matching speaker will accompany the radio, which is good. They're going to give us an external speaker. And if you bought one for the FT-10, you may recall that external speaker is, up near $200. So that makes me wonder where the price point's going to be with this rig. But, speculation is that it's going to be priced in such a way that it'll go head-to-head with the IC7300. We shall see. External display connection, DVI-D. See, that's something that I guess what you call the competitor of this radio right now, the IC7300, does not have as a direct output to a display, but this is going to have the same direct output that the FT-10 has, the DVI-D connection. And caution there, you want to actually use a DVI-D cable and a DVI-D rated monitor. They are still available. You may have to look a little bit harder to find them. But the resolution of DVI-D is far more than necessary for what this display information is. I mean, the amount of information and the resolution that is going out that DVI-D connector to a monitor is, quite honestly, not much of a task. Okay, so HDMI is overkill. HDMI can carry audio as well, not really needed. So my suspicion is, and such was the case with the FT-10, I supposed that maybe Yaesu got a very good deal on an overabundance of DVI-D connectors sitting in a warehouse somewhere. Just my speculation. Built-in high-speed, but the thing is, for radio in this price range, you're going to be able to plug a monitor in. No interface required. Built-in high-speed antenna tuner, okay, with a 100-channel memory. Don't forget, these internal ATUs, as they're called, these antenna tuners, they're really a touch-up tuner. That's what I call them. They'll take a 3-to-1 and perfect it. So in other words, your dipole, you may trim it for the middle of the band, and you find yourself working the edges of a band. Those touch-up tuners can bring you right back down to a perfect match or near perfect match. But they're not going to take something like a doublet and make it work on every band. Okay, you're going to have a wide range antenna tuner for something like that. But these are great to have inside of the rig if you're using, shall we say, nearly resonant antennas and they just need a little bit of a touch-up. That's why I call them a touch-up tuner. All right, and then support for FC40 auto tuner. That would be an external tuner. But I gotta tell you, the FC40 is also just a touch-up tuner, okay? Much more than a 3-to-1, it can't help you out. If you're going to deal with something like a doublet, you need to get something, a serious, dedicated, wide-range auto tuner or manual tuner. All right, then SD memory card. So just like the FT-10, you're going to have a memory card slot. And in the FT-10's case, well, it says here, it'll save the, you can record a QSO. Now, you can't retransmit that QSO on the FT-10. Probably won't be able to do it on this radio as well, because I imagine they probably borrowed all of this from the FT-10. The transceiver settings, the memory content, so in other words, the menu settings, and then your memories, like if you program in your own favorite frequencies and modes and all that. And that's a really cool thing to do with these Yaesu radios, because you can, by using a memory, you can recall everything. Filter settings, DNR setting or not, noise blanker or not, all those settings. Just is a great feature. And, of course, capture screen images. On the FT-10, you double-click the mode button and you can capture whatever's on your display at that moment. So, and the ability to update the firmware. So this part here is just like FT-10. 2 USB ports, Type A and B. Now, on the FT-10, you have a Type A and 2 Bs. So maybe, just a smaller chassis. So maybe this is not going to have that extra B type on the rear. Other essential features such as CW Zen, that's 0N, and Spot. Now, I'm about to get something that's really curious, but let me focus on these a moment. If you're not familiar with those terms, same as the FT-10, you've got a 0N button for CW. So if you set your CW pitch to 600 hertz, that's what I set it to. It's just, I like to me, that's a good frequency for me working weak CW stations, and I can hear that come up out of the noise floor. So what zero in does is, instead of you having to turn your VFO to find that exact frequency, which the radio does have a little indicator you can watch, and it'll let you know when you've narrowed down to exactly on their frequency. Because, okay, so some radios drift a little bit. So if somebody says they're on 7.061, they may not be exactly on 7.061. They might be on 7.061.01. So what Zen can do is you tap it, and it will find their exact frequency to give you the 600 hertz tone that you seek. Okay, it's a really cool feature. Okay, now let me relate it to other radios. It's like auto tune. Now I'm not talking about a tuner. It's the thing that just adjusts your receiver frequency just enough to make sure, and I should say VFO really, not just the receiver, just enough to make sure you're lined up with the exact frequency of the other station that's transmitting. So it's a really cool thing. You just tap a button and it does it for you. Spot, you long press that Zen button on the FT-710 and it'll actually produce your 600 tone, and then you could tune by ear with the VFO. But this is the part that I'm curious about. IPO, intercept point optimization. So back over here to this this diagram. So intercept point optimization is something you normally see with a super heterodyne radio from Yaesu, and because the intercept point is in this first mixer stage. Now, I can only speculate that if that's not a misprint and they're truly doing that, they're probably going to work some sort of magic here at the RF amp stage, assuming it has an RF amp, okay? I mean, they could send this signal directly over. I'm speculating that might be something Yaesu has done, is they've included an RF amplifier stage to boost the signal coming in after it goes through the bandpass filter. Well, all IPO is that they adjust the amplification amount here at this stage. So intercept point optimization is, the intercept point is typically this first mixer in a superhet radio. It's intercepting the signal coming in off the antenna, and it creates this first intermediate frequency we call the first IF that feeds the roofing filter. Intercept point optimization is a term that Yaesu uses to describe the fact that rather than boosting this, like you'll see on your radios, AMP1, AMP2, okay? So those are, some people call them preamplifiers. So that's the amount of boost you're giving that signal coming in off the antenna. The AMP1 is a certain amount of gain, depends on the radio. AMP2 is what we call cascaded. It just adds more gain to AMP1. IPO, typically, like say the FT-710, intercept point optimization, they're not using AMP1 or 2. What they have is they have a very low gain amplifier that boosts the signal just enough, but not to the point that it begins to introduce more noise. So it's optimized for noise, and in fact, what we call signal to noise ratio. So it's enough boost of the signal before boosting the noise. Very low gain. So perhaps Yaesu is going to, it shouldn't be rocket science to do, but they must have something in that area of the FT-710. And again, now, don't forget, we're looking at an FT-DX10 here. But the fact that they state intercept point optimization here seems to indicate that they have worked out something in their SDR receiver that is going to help optimize the signal to noise ratio. That's basically all we need to know about that, I guess. They have a similar thing on the IC7300 called IP Plus, Intercept Point Plus, but it works a little bit differently. It uses something called dithering, okay? It's actually kind of complex. It's actually injecting noise into the signal chain, but what it does for that radio is it improves its what we call cross-modulation characteristic. It helps it out a little bit on selectivity. So, for example, if you look at Sherwood's numbers on an IC7300, it's going to do better with the IP Plus engaged. So maybe this is going to be Yaesu, even though they're calling it IPO, just like they do on their superhets, they've probably done some tweaking on this. I can only speculate until I see a block diagram. or a schematic, but it seems like they may have, come up with their own flavor of something like IP Plus. So again, remains to be seen. Hopefully, that's not a typographical error, because that is an advantage on the superhets, having that intercept point optimization. On bands, anything lower than 10 megahertz, 40 meters and down to 160, I always run IPO, and I sometimes run it even on 20 meters and maybe even 17, depending on where the noise floor is. Because if you've watched videos on my channel long enough, you know I'm always trying to get that S meter to go to the left. Okay, I always want that S meter down. I want that noise floor to be low. Because if you've got S2, S3 noise level on your receiver, you've already got too much gain. So you don't need AMP1 or AMP2. And so I'm hoping that this isn't a misprint and that they have some sort of an intercept point optimization scheme created for the FT-710. And again, down here we saw the included accessories. And here are some, again, they said preliminary, some preliminary specs. You'll see here the UK version will have the 70 megahertz band. And the receive frequency range, 30 kilohertz to 75 megahertz. Gives you here the 1.8 to 29.69999 specified performance amateur bands only. We don't have a lot of info there yet. Here are your emission modes. Basically, it's going to be able to do CW, AM, sideband, FM. And don't forget, it can do the digital modes as well because it's got the presets in there. And there's your supply voltage, power output 5 to 100. So it's going to have, just like the FT-10, the ability to set the output power between 5 watts and 100 watts. And if you're using one of those solid-state amplifiers today, if you have ventured into that area to get an amplifier, most of those don't require a whole lot of drive. 40 watts will get you a ton with a solid-state, most of the solid-state amps. Some of them require more. There are some out there that would require maybe 80 watts. And then there are your dimensions. And if you compare that to the FT-991A, it's just ever so slightly smaller. The weight is even about the same as FT-991A, in between the 9 and 10 pound range, or 4.5 kilograms. So there we go, a deep dive into these specs on the FT-710. And as I promised, as more information rolls out about this rig, I will get it to you as soon as I can. I just wanted to go ahead and do a little bit deeper dive into the specs portion of this. And I wanted to go through that block diagram with you so you can understand what this radio is and is not. John Crux said it himself that this is not going to be a contest class radio. So if you're big into contesting and you're used to having somebody move in a half a kilohertz away from you, this radio is not going to solve that. That's even tough with an FT-10 or an FT-101. But, in other words, it's not going to have that ability like the hybrid does to tighten that front end more so when you're in contest conditions. Doesn't mean it won't be a fun radio. It's like I tell people all the time. If they say, well, I'm trying to decide between an FT-10 and an IC7300, the FT-10 is a little bit higher in price. Well, now, if you're a serious contester, I'm going to say go with the FT-10. Or even if you just contest maybe occasionally, you probably still enjoy the FT-10. You'd like maybe even having that monitor that you can, the jack on the back to just plug a monitor in and you're ready to go. But if you just come in and let's say you come in after work and you jump on a 75 meter net and rag chew you with your buddies, the ICOM IC7300 is all the radio you will ever need. This type of radio, well, sorry, not the 710, but the FT-10 and those type class radios, those are going to give you that edge when you're in contest conditions, or shall we say emergency conditions. Think of contest conditions as kind of preparing us for what's it going to be like if we have a national emergency and everybody's jumping on the ham bands. You're going to have a lot of congestion. That's one of the reasons I like CW, because it takes very little bandwidth and very little power compared to sideband. But in super crowded band conditions, even this FT-710 is not going to compete with an FT-10. I'm sorry. But I believe this is going to blow the world away as far as think of it as a really good quality entry-level radio for a base station, or like I said, I may even consider this for a mobile rig should I decide to buy one. Because if you already own an FT-10, you don't need this. this is extra. All right, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it informative. Stay with me and I'll keep you up to date on this. If you would, please do me a favor and click that like button. Smash that thumbs up. Helps us out with YouTube. You guys that have been watching the channel enough know that. And also consider subscribing to the channel. If you do subscribe, don't forget to click that bell, that notification bell, and you'll be notified when I upload a new video. I generally do 1 or 2 a week, sometimes 3 like this one. I'm going to release this one the day it's recorded. I want to get pertinent information out as quick as I can. And then also, if you would, share the video with friends, maybe via text message, email, social media, so that the information gets out to others who you think might find this interesting. And finally, if you would, consider becoming a Patreon supporter of the channel. And speaking of that, I want to thank the Patreon team who bring these videos to you. Their monthly donations offset the cost of me doing this. Otherwise, I would not be able to do it. These videos, this channel would go away. So if you want to help out with that, if you appreciate the content, I don't have any sponsors, so I need some help, offsetting the cost of doing this. And if you'd like to participate, help me continue to bring you the unvarnished truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I like to say, regardless of who the manufacturer is. I'm not aligned with any manufacturer. If you want to help me continue to be able to do that and be unbiased, please consider joining the Patreon team. You go to www.patreon.com/N4HNH. That's Patreon, patreon.com/N4HNH. And again, I want to thank you for watching this video, and I hope you found it helpful and informative. And with that, I'll say 73 from N4HNH.